You were never warned. Not by the brand you trusted, not by the system built to protect you, and not by the reputation that made you feel safe. For decades, trust was supposed to mean safety, experience, discipline, standards that never bent. But what if that trust slowly became the most dangerous part of the system? What if believing everything was fine is exactly what allowed risk to grow unnoticed? Because when trust replaces scrutiny, failure doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly. What changed wasn't the product first, it was the system behind it. For most people, trust isn't optional. You trust the systems that carry you through the sky. You trust that decades of engineering knowledge didn't just vanish. You trust that safety rules are sacred, not flexible. And for a long time, that trust felt earned. Aviation became one of the safest forms of travel, not because of confidence, but because of obsession, obsessive testing, obsessive redundancy, obsessive refusal to accept shortcuts. But systems don't collapse all at once. They drift. Slowly, quietly, pressure changes priorities. Metrics replace instincts. Processes replace judgment. And somewhere along the way, trust stopped being something that had to be constantly re-earned. It became something assumed, something inherited, something no longer questioned. This story isn't about a single mistake or a single moment. It's about how a reputation built over generations can begin to do dangerous work on its own, shielding decisions from scrutiny and muting internal alarms. Because when everyone believes a system is safe, fewer people feel responsible for proving that it still is. And that's when risk stops looking like danger and starts looking like normal. The moment trust becomes automatic is the moment accountability starts to fade. Most people believe trust is the final layer of safety, that once a system has proven itself long enough, it no longer needs to be questioned as aggressively. Experience becomes a substitute for verification. Inside large institutions, this belief is comforting because scrutiny is expensive. It slows things down, it creates friction, and friction looks inefficient on spreadsheets. Over time, success rewires behavior. When nothing goes wrong for years, pressure shifts away from prevention and toward performance. Deadlines matter more. Costs get measured more closely. Warnings begin to sound like obstacles instead of protection. This is how trust quietly changes roles. It stops acting as a result of safety and starts acting as permission to relax it. Engineers don't suddenly forget how to build safely. What changes is what they're allowed to fight for. When speed, budget, and market pressure become immovable, safety gets negotiated instead of enforced. And here's the dangerous illusion. Everything still looks fine. The planes still fly. The system still works. So trust deepens, confidence grows, and oversight becomes thinner. Not because people stop caring, but because the system rewards compliance more than caution. This is the moment where risk stops being an emergency. It becomes background noise, something acknowledged, documented, and postponed. Not ignored, normalized. Once risk feels normal, even serious warnings start sounding exaggerated. From the outside, none of this is visible. That's what makes it so dangerous. Public trust doesn't erode when systems weaken. It often grows stronger. Reputation fills the gaps that oversight leaves behind. People assume someone else has already checked. Inside complex organizations, this creates a psychological trap. Responsibility diffuses. Each layer trusts the one above it. Each department assumes another team is watching the risks. Warnings still exist, but they change form. They get rewritten as suggestions, reframed as manageable issues, scheduled for future review. And because nothing catastrophic happens immediately, the system learns the wrong lesson. It learns that pushing limits is safe, that caution is optional, that trust will absorb the consequences. This is how invisible failure is engineered. Not through malice, but through structure. When incentives reward speed and silence more than resistance, people adapt. They stop raising alarms that go nowhere. They stop escalating concerns that slow progress. They stop believing their objections matter. And the public never sees any of this. All they see is a brand they've trusted for decades. a name associated with reliability, a history that feels like a guarantee. But trust is not a control system. It doesn't detect errors. It doesn't stop drift. It only hides it. And when something finally breaks, it feels sudden, unthinkable, shocking, even though the conditions for failure were quietly assembling for years. The real danger wasn't the failure itself. It was how long the system tolerated it. Here's the rule most people never see. Trust doesn't fail systems. It replaces the mechanisms that keep systems honest. In healthy environments, trust is earned repeatedly. Every test challenges assumptions. Every review looks for weakness. Every delay is tolerated because safety outranks speed. But once trust becomes automatic, the hierarchy quietly reverses. Deadlines gain authority, market pressure becomes urgent, and safety starts needing justification. This is where the system breaks, not loudly, but logically. Decisions begin to optimize for what can be measured: costs, timelines, shareholder expectations. What can't be easily measured, long-term risk, rare failure, systemic fragility, gets pushed aside. No single person makes a reckless choice. Instead, dozens of reasonable decisions align in the same direction, each one small, each one defensible, each one slightly less conservative than the last. And trust fills the gaps between them. When concerns are raised, they collide with something heavier than engineering logic. They collide with momentum, with reputational confidence, with the unspoken belief that we've done this before. At that point, trust becomes a shield, not for people, but for processes. It protects the system from interruption, from delay, from uncomfortable questions. This is the moment accountability shifts, not because standards disappear, but because enforcement weakens, because stopping progress feels more dangerous than continuing it. And that's the paradox. Trust, which once protected lives, now protects motion. From the outside, everything still appears disciplined. Checklists exist, reviews happen, approvals are signed. But the spirit of scrutiny, the willingness to stop, to challenge, to escalate, has thinned. So when failure finally surfaces, it looks like a sudden collapse, a shocking break, an unexpected outcome. But in reality, it's the delayed result of a system that learned to rely on trust instead of proof. Once you see this pattern, you start noticing it far beyond aviation. The lesson here isn't that trust is bad. It's that trust is dangerous when it stops being questioned. Strong systems assume failure is always possible. They design for it. They expect it. They plan for it even when everything seems fine. Weak systems assume reputation will catch mistakes before consequences do. They lean on history instead of verification. They treat past success as future protection. This is why the most reliable industries don't celebrate trust. They celebrate paranoia. They reward skepticism. They encourage dissent. Because safety isn't a feeling, it's a process. And processes only work when they're enforced, not assumed. For individuals, the pattern is the same. We trust brands, institutions, systems we interact with every day. But blind trust always carries risk. Not because people are malicious, but because incentives drift, because priorities change, because pressure accumulates silently. The moment trust becomes the reason we stop asking questions, it turns into a liability. The real protection comes from understanding how systems behave under stress, from recognizing when confidence replaces caution, from noticing when speed begins to outrank safety. That awareness doesn't create fear, it creates clarity, and clarity is what keeps trust from becoming dangerous in the first place. But the consequences of this shift don't stop inside corporations. This pattern didn't stop with one company or one industry. It's becoming more common everywhere. Systems scale faster than scrutiny. Technology moves quicker. Markets punish delays harder. Public patience shrinks. And under that pressure, trust becomes a shortcut. A way to move fast without stopping to prove things still work. We see it in finance, in healthcare, in infrastructure. Anywhere complexity grows faster than accountability. The danger isn't innovation, It's optimization without resistance. Because modern systems are so interconnected that failure no longer stays contained. One weak link propagates outward. One assumption multiplies. And when trust is used to smooth over uncertainty instead of confronting it, the entire system becomes fragile, no matter how impressive it looks on the surface. That's why today's biggest risks rarely come from obvious negligence. They come from respected institutions drifting quietly out of alignment with the principles that once made them safe. So the real question isn't who failed, it's what we keep trusting without proof. This is why RIN Wealth exists, not to scare you, but to sharpen how you see systems that affect your life. Because the most dangerous risks rarely come with warnings. They hide behind familiarity, behind confidence, behind trust that no longer earns itself. If you want to understand how power, incentives, and hidden structures really work, this is where we decode them, not as outsiders, but as people who refuse to confuse trust with safety ever again. Once you see systems clearly, you start noticing risk everywhere.